just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out.
From WBN Radio and on the Boston Red Network, Friday Jobber, our 22nd day of February 2019 edition. Very interesting edition we'll have. Got the old coffee pot going, etc. We'll talk about the Mississippi River strategy of Amy Klobuchar. That is from the decision headquarters, and we'll see where it is going. We have our people at the University of Virginia, Charlottesville, and as we normally do, we salute Heather Heyer. And a confused situation out of Chicago. We won't spend very much time with it. The election day in Chicago, mayor's race there, and we'll talk with the ad lady, hopefully out of Chicago, Emma Young, about the mayoral race. But the headlines have been talking about the Smoot case, I think, Schuette. Anyway, Schuette evidently is an actor. He was supposedly attacked by some people. Now the police blame him for staging the attack. But the problem is not the attack would be heinous enough, but the problem is how the news media has covered this. There are 24 detectives on the case. This is a minor case, although it's in the press, but it is a minor case in itself. I don't even think, maybe he was hospitalized. I hadn't been following his case. I've never followed his show. I have no idea what his show is about. But anyway, nonetheless, this case is one of these made-for-TV type, reality type cases, and it still goes on and on and on. Nonetheless, he was charged basically with making a false police report, and they elevated it to a felony. I'm not sure if that will stand the elevation of a felony there, but again, they're trying to get as much water out of the rock as they can, and in his case, we'll see where it goes. Supposedly, the police superintendent, Mr. Johnson, was talking about that and the misplace of resources and the damage it did to the city of Chicago, etc., across the board. But there are all kinds of things that happen in the city of Chicago. The murder rate in the city of Chicago is very high. The city of Chicago has not effectively addressed that, and to address it, they have to do development in the neighborhoods in which it's taking place. To provide jobs is not enough. They have to actually develop the neighborhoods, and that falls upon the mayor now, Emmanuel, which has neglected those neighborhoods on the south and west side where African Americans predominate. It is a bad situation, but we'll talk to Emma more about that in her take on the case involving this 30-something operator there and where he goes from here. His lawyers promise a vigorous defense, supposedly. Not sure how vigorous it is. It's probably vigorous on one hand, and on the evidently they did you imagine when you have 25 detectives, 24, whatever. They took video, they interviewed hundreds of people to see whom was on where. They saw two brothers entering the place. The brothers evidently plea bargained it out and said that he planned the whole thing. Now, how solid that is, I have no idea. If they have a actual video of the brothers beating him, I don't know. But they also claim a check was made. Now, why would you pay someone in a check? I mean, there are just a lot of things going on here. And evidently one of the brothers was in the TV series and had a bid part or something there. So in other words, it's a typical case. It would probably happen in New York, not in Chicago. But with the cold wave in Chicago, the Cortex coming in, Arctic Cortex, etc., they need some entertainment there, I suppose. Anyway, enough of that. There's the election that was postponed in Nigeria, more important situation, will be ran on Saturday, tomorrow. And also at the same time, big showdown in Venezuela. Right-wing forces are bringing in the so-called humanitarian food, medical supply into Venezuela. When the problem was caused, and this is an unfortunate situation here with the BBC, the problem was caused by the economic boycotts, sanctions on the government of Venezuela. And now these same forces that supported the boycott, basically the U.S., known as the Empire, Canada, etc., and some in Europe that sponsored the boycott, they've all of a sudden got together tons of quote-unquote food, various kinds of sanitation kits, etc., and the self-created crowned, I guess he created himself, Juan Guaido is on his way to the border, I suppose, to personally bring some of the aid back. But they're in buses. The buses have various checks, and from the news reports, the borders, the major border crossings, at least there are probably many more, are closed at night. So in other words, they'll open how they will deal with this. They've had some skirmishes between the authorities. Now this is interesting here. You could say the hypocrisy of the whole situation. In the U.S., Trump wants to build a border wall to keep people out, etc. And in Venezuela, they have a bridge, and they have a few military types there, or police types at their border. And Trump is talking about, and they've done the same thing here. Trump has put thousands of military personnel there. You've already got thousands of border police and various other federal agencies on that so-called border with Mexico. Now, so far, we've not seen films of any large numbers of troops being deployed on those border areas. We saw one where there may have been 15 or 20 people there and had a container blocking the bridge. But they open the bridge up, people go back and forth. Now, whether or not the government will let people bring in individual packages, that has to be seen. But they basically what they're going to try to do is cause a riot at the border and hope that some provocateurs in the crowd, and they will be there, that will throw rocks or shoot at the troops, and the troops will shoot back. Now, this is what could happen, and they'd use that as something to intervene. At the same time, there are water borders, sea borders, or whatever. There are some of those nations that has been closed off. Aruba and some other very small island nations. They were going to assemble boats there. Evidently, they have a ship coming from Puerto Rico, coming in, I assume, into one of those islands, and try to bring in some of this stuff in by sea. I suppose the next option they'll go to is an old trick they've had around since the Great Patriotic, or after the Great Patriotic War. They just airlift the stuff. In other words, parachutes. There's plenty of forestry areas, out back in Venezuela, but they can just simply drop the various supplies there, and then people could go and pick them up. Period. They find out where they are, they could pick them up and bring them into the cities. They'll probably pull every trick out of the book. But if they really wanted to cure the problem there in Venezuela, at least a shortage of medications and food, the Venezuelan government is perfectly capable of buying the food. The problem is the boycott is keeping some of those things out, like insulin, etc. Nonetheless, we'll have a special programming on that. I keep saying special programming. We'll have special programming tomorrow, particularly if it's catastrophic. And this is African History Month. We understand that. We will have some programming there. We're about 80% finished with one on Louis Farrakhan. Louis Farrakhan is the minister in Chicago, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, a center of over 60 years of African American struggle within the country. And we'll also have a program with Vanessa Tyson. She is the academic, and they're still fighting this in Virginia now with Fairfax, the Attorney General. She accuses him. They're trying to decide if they will have an investigation of Lieutenant Governor Fairfax in Virginia. And also there's an investigation opened in the Commonwealth in Boston. But the problem is the age of the allegations. The time and date are not denied. He says they're consensual. She says they're not. But anyway, nonetheless, in our presentation, we'll have the statement there where you can read it. And also a presentation she gave at the Stanford University. And it's about 60 minutes or so long there. She and two other panelists there, one being the former dean of the Stanford Law School. In fact, he actually, I don't have my cheat sheet here, but clerked for Justice Holland. And the justice there, he retired, and I'm trying to think who replaced him right now. Holland, excuse me. I can't remember right now who replaced him, but I believe he retired in the 50s. So this fellow's been around. He's a chair emeritus. He had to be chair emeritus. Anyway, he is more the MC there, and there's some Q&A. It's a very interesting presentation there at their center, this behavioral center there at the Stanford University. They deal in this type of violence towards women and girls and boys and men. So I think that'll be an interesting addition to African History Month. Let me go here's part of our continual coverage. We're going to talk about mathematics here briefly. For an African mathematician, what it's like to be the only one. Fewer than 1% of doctorates in math are awarded to African Americans. The man's name is Ed Ray Goins. He is one of them. And I'll just read a little bit of it here. It's in the New York Times by Amy Harmon. It was not an overt incident of racism that prompted Ed Ray Goins, African American mathematician, in the prime of his career, to abandon his tenured position on a faculty of major research university. He was at Purdue, one of the Boilermakers. The hostility he perceived were subtle, the signs of disrespect unspoken. There was a time he was brushed aside by leaders of his field, when he approached with a math question at a conference. There were reports from students in his department at the Purdue University that a European professor had warned them not to work with him. Only one of only perhaps a dozen African American mathematicians amongst the nearly 2,000 tenured faculty in the nation's top 50 math departments. Goins frequently asked himself whether he was right to factor in race into the challenges he faced. That question from a senior colleague on his area of expertise directed to someone else his department designation to nominate him to the committee that controlled hiring. The presumption by a famous visiting scholar that he was another professor's student. What about a chorus of chuckling that erupted at a luncheon with European and Asian colleagues when, in response to suggestion that they invite underrepresented minorities as seminar speakers, one confused and asked if Australians qualified. I can give you an instance after instance. Dr. Goins, he's 46 years old, said as he navigated the annual meeting of the nation's mathematicians in Baltimore last month. But even for himself, I questioned, did it really happen that way, or am I just blowing it out of proportion? Is this reality about race, a leaky pipe? African Americans receive about 5% of the doctorate degrees awarded each year across all disciplines. But they have received just 1% of those granted out of over the last decade in mathematics. Like many who see that disparity, a large pool of untapped talent, Dr. Goins has been preoccupied with fixing what he's known as a leaky pipe, addressing the racial disparity that exists at every level of math education. The logic goes, and the racial diversity amongst those who grapple with math's biggest problems will follow. To that end, Dr. Goins delivered guest lectures to undergraduates, middle school and high school math students, organizes summer research programs for underrepresented math for undergraduates, mentors underrepresented math graduate students, and heads an advisory group was formed in 1969, the American Mathematical Society, that the Professional Association for Research Mathematics rejected a proposal to address the draft of African and Latino members. Dr. Goins' own journey through the pipeline was propelled by a magnet program that offered advanced placement calculus for the first time in his majority African American. They use the term black, but I'm changing that over. Los Angeles High School, 1990, having aced the AP Calculus BC exam, he became the first student from that school ever to gain admission to the prestigious California Institute of Technology, just 20 miles away. He could walk there. The 10 African students in his incoming class were the largest group at Caltech had ever enrolled. He learned when he wrote a paper on the little-known history of being black at Caltech. And we'll append some of these on. Most classmates, Dr. Goins quickly realized had arrived from math training went far beyond his own. His freshman year, he sometimes called his high school calculus teacher for help with the homework. In his sophomore year, he watched from his dormitory room the beating of Rodney King. Incidentally, we have a special program over at Blog Talk that's featured there, an interview with Rodney King. And Blog Talk will be shutting down our format for the last of this month, so many of the programs have already moved to other places, including Spreaker, and I believe that program is there, but I need to get there and write a script and make sure that everything transfers as it should. Dr. Goins won 2 math prizes at Caltech, and in 1999 he received a PhD from Stanford's math department, one of 3 African Americans that had ever done so, according to an informal account by William Massey, a Princeton professor, who received the second in 2004. After holding a visiting professor position at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton, that's Princeton, New Jersey, and another at Harvard. Goins joined the faculty of West Lafayette there, and you're such an inspiration. That is from Talifa, Washington, an African-American mathematician who's now a tenured professor at the Howard University, that's in Washington, D.C. And I won't read all of this, but I will append it some of what has happened at a recent meeting where Dr. Goins delivered a keynote address entitled "The Dream Deferred: 50 Years of Blacks in Mathematics." His presentation his present kind of conversation about racial insights in a math world. What do they make eye contact with? Not you, said Nathaniel Whitaker. He's also an African American who heads the Department of Mathematics and Statistics at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. Very good university. Michael Young, a mathematician at Iowa State, says he's almost given up on graph theory a few years ago after an encounter with some leaders in the field at the Math Institute at the University of California, Los Angeles. A couple of them were on a board writing something, he recalled, and I went over and asked, what are you working on? We are too far in to catch you up, they said. In other words, direct exclusion, direct insults, direct disrespect, period. So this is something that needs to be done. I may eventually turn this into a special program. I'm thinking about that. I may have to do that because there are other documents that encompass this, and some studies here, exit interview study, executive study, University of Michigan, advanced placement program, conducted several interviews with tenure-track faculty who chose to leave University of Michigan for purposes anyway. Several of these things here. I might do this, and this is Columbia University report makes recommendations to address gender race disparities amongst faculty. This is from Columbia University, and here's his A Dream Deferred: 50 Years of Blacks in Mathematics. Professor Goins here. I'll go ahead and append this one. Now, we'll change here and go to Decision Q HQ. We've used this place before. We did a special program, and invite you to listen to it, on Amy Klobuchar of the Mississippi. And this is basically what this is. Amy Klobuchar pitches navigating the Mississippi towards the presidency. And it's certainly no accident that the Minnesota senator launched a 2020 campaign standing next to the Mississippi River courses of snow. Not only did it allow her to discuss the 2007 bridge collapse there, but it gave her an opening to argue her regional strength as a candidate. Mississippi runs through 10 states, 2 of them that flipped from Obama to DJ Trump, and a third, the home state of Minnesota, was a narrow victory there for Hillary Clinton, 1.52. In a speech, we are gathered here today on the Mississippi River, America's great river, running straight through the middle of our country, through the heartland. And here's some various maps here talking about of interest is how Democratic victory margins in 1976 to 2010 are nearly identical, but with obvious demographic differences. Carter was weak up north, Clinton was strong in the suburban regions, and pockets of the South. And in 1976, Jimmy Carter with the Mississippi came out 52.4. Ford, after the impeachment of Tricky Dick, had 45.23. In 2016, Hillary Clinton, 49.2, and DJ Trump, 44.12. And this shows a map of the Mississippi from where it starts in Minnesota down to New Orleans. In 1980, Jimmy Carter had 46.56 and Ronald Reagan 46.31. Jimmy Carter by a few points. In 1984, Walter Mondale, who was also of Minnesota, lost to Reagan by 53.20. Of course, it was a landslide. Mondale got 45.50. In 1988, it was George H.W. Bush. He got 48.19%. And my own Michael Dukakis, 50.94. And two of the largest Democratic margins were in 92 and 96 when Bill Clinton strengthened Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Louisiana, and Mississippi, carried every single state but Mississippi. And so, yeah, it was Bill Clinton got 47.33, and Bush, that was the first President Bush, 37.55. And in 1996, again, it was Bill Clinton at 52.82%, and Bob Dole at 56.89. And in 2000, it was Albert Gore. He started, incidentally, a trip down to Mississippi from St. Louis at 51.46, and G.W. Bush, 44.56. That was an election that Albert Gore actually won. It was stolen from him. And in 2004, Brother John Kerry got 52.66, and G.W. Bush, 49.41. And Barack Obama had similar success to Clinton by improving his margins in counties that bordered the group. Of course, he won Illinois, Wisconsin, and Iowa, but lost every border state and southern state since a slip in 2012 and in 2014. That was along the Mississippi. He did win Florida and Ohio. In 2012, it was Barack Obama, 54.03, and Willard Romney, 44.05. We jump back to Minnesota. Hillary Clinton carried the state by 51.28 to 52.28 to 39.27, and the last time around, that was 2016? The river counties, I should say. Okay, anyway, we made our point. This ugly situation here 2 years later carried the same counties. This is what Amy Klobuchar did in Minnesota, 63 to 78 to 32 while carrying the state. She got 60.32% of the vote, and no doubt about it, she'll carry Minnesota. But the question is, will she be able to carry Iowa? Well, we'll see. In 2012, she carried the state with 55.23 of the vote to 30.38. That was the last time she was on the ballot. Oh, wait a minute. In a presidential year, that is. Barack Obama, 52.65 to 44.96. The same Mississippi River counties in Minnesota. He carried the state, and the counties he carried on 55.04 to 42.62. So, her performance relates to recent Democratic presidential candidates, primarily in the era of DJ Trump. They likely will become recurring talking point of her campaign as it rolls out. Well, before the general election, we'll be betting on strong finishes. She has to finish strong in Iowa and finish in Minnesota, Wisconsin, while performing well in Missouri, Illinois, Arkansas, and Kentucky. Be interesting to see how she does in Kentucky, and even in Arkansas. The primary along Mississippi, however, dispersed throughout the election season. The Iowa caucus, of course, is first. While Kentucky and Arkansas voters, they don't vote until May 19th, almost June. Louisiana and Mississippi cast their votes in early March. That's getting close to super primary. It may be on super primary. Both states feature a different kind of demographic from upriver. Bernie Sanders won the caucus and primary nights in the far upper end. He won Minnesota and Wisconsin, but lost the middle four states. He only lost Iowa by a few votes. And he lost Illinois, Missouri, and Kentucky. Yeah, I'm not sure how convincing that was. I'd have to look at that one again. Anyway, this is how they turned out. I thought we would get that theme here out of the way. Let's go to the University of Virginia at Charlottesville. New Virginia poll, Northam's approval weak, but Virginians are not demanding his resignation. This is for the Center for Politics. Doesn't say who is by him. They're anonymous. Fairfax is in worse shape of the free and battle Democrats. Virginians split on how to fill potential vacancies in top office. DJ Trump is low. New Virginia Center for Politics ISOP poll shows is weak, but Virginians are not demanding his resignation. Well, that's 3 elected officers statewide. Executive, all 3 have been in battle. A few weeks ago, Northam medical school. I won't go over this because everybody knows what he was, and not. Only 17% of adults surveyed said they approve of him. About as low as you can go. While 43% disapprove. Large 44% neither approve or disapprove. That's why he's still there, or in office, that is. Just 31% of respondents say that Northam should resign, while 43 said he should not, so he'll be sticking around. Now Fairfax, resignation 35 to 25, but with another 34 respondents saying they are not sure one way or the other. There's a sharp racial difference on this. I bet there is. The response expressing an opinion about Fairfax's resignation was fairly similar to the overall sample, with 39% in favor of him resigning, 26% saying he should not. Meanwhile, only 8% of African Americans said he should resign, 29% said he shouldn't, and the rest said they don't know or declined to respond. The Virginia way, only 19% believed Herring as the Attorney General should resign, 14% favor impeachment. He's generally escaped a raft between the other two. Of the 25% of adults surveyed approve of DJ Trump's approval rate of job performance, with 56% disapproving. That's not very good for DJ Trump. And as for as bad as Trump's approval rating is, 25%, Northam is even worse. Yeah, he no doubt is 17%. Can't get much worse than that. President, let's see, the governor, the president, Mark Warner, he's one of the senators in Virginia. He's at 39% approval, 19% disapproval, and 37% don't know about him one way or the other. Study was conducted online by the ISO people there, who used to be ROPA. This study is different from other previous polls. Ipsos has conducted in conjunction with the University of Virginia, in that the survey was conducted using a probability-based online panel as opposed to a nonpartisan panel. Interesting. Anyway, we'll look back upon that particular one. Let me just run to the Washington Post here and make sure we got everything. I think we talked about this Coast Guard lieutenant type that had all kinds of weapons at his house. He had moved around evidently several times from military branches. But he also used his work computer, had a spreadsheet of his enemies list, so to speak. Nancy Pelosi was on it. Twitter King Booker, I believe, was on it. And several, Don Lemon of CNN, I think he's still there, was also on it. So they had a lot of different people on his list and how he was going to carry it out. So he'll be in jail for a very, very long time. An urban terrorist. The ACLU has filed another lawsuit asking the judge to order the Trump administration to account for all migrant kids separating their parents. A good thing to do. In the state of North Carolina, they are getting ready to have a new election after all the irregularities they had in North Carolina. Jeffrey Epstein, in a molesting case, prosecutors deal there violated the law. What's his name here? Roger Stone is still on the loose after apologizing to the judge, but she said if he makes another mistake, his lifestyle will change, in which she'll put him in jail and he won't see the light out for a very, very long time. In Oakland, California, there is a teacher's strike going on in Oakland, California. We'll have more on this Justin Shulet character tomorrow. Anyway, I think Venezuela, we talked about the so-called humanitarian aid. There's cars, buses, busy at the... and from Beijing, it had warned that Beijing and the Chinese oppose any type of interference in Venezuela. The government there in Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, threatened to close the bridge with Colombia, and I think that's basically what we've already reported. Won't go back over. In North Carolina, a new election is ordered. Evidently, what will happen in North Carolina, 5-0, what else could they do? This involved Harris, who narrowly beat a Democrat in that race. But now they have to have not only another election, but another primary. So we'll see where that all turns out there. The race is the country's last unsettled one. He led Bob McCready this is Harris, by 905 votes out of 282,717 votes cast in there. So we'll see where all of that turns out in this election. We'll be watching. The Democrats think they have at least a 50-50 chance of coming out of this in one piece. In Maryland, the governor there, so-called moderate Democrat, claims the Republican National Committee is shielding old DJ Trump from a primary. He's thinking about throwing his hat in the ring. Governor Ware, the former governor Ware, the Commonwealth, has already thrown his hat into the ring. So it'll be interesting if Hogan throws his hat into the ring. He captures a significant portion. He ran against our own Ben Jealous there, and it was unfortunate that he slipped back in. Portion of the African-American vote and female vote in heavy Democratic state. Two people close to Hogan said the governor represents a style of republicanism that's lacking in today's politics. Well, yeah, no doubt about that. If he has any style at all. And the question is, what are they afraid of? Hogan said he's talking to Politico because on one hand, you look at polls, 70% of Republicans support the president in the primary. So why are they so concerned? They are concerned because some unknown candidate could come in and knock off old DJ Trump, and then what will happen to his 40-something%? We don't know. That is a problem with any. So let me just take my time here. I'll go ahead and do the sports, and we'll figure out what to do with the mathematician. Nonetheless, let's see. I'm just looking at. We'll start with the women's scores here. This is Maryland and Minnesota. Maryland Terrapins by 2 points, 71-69 for the Minnesota Gophers. Now we'll do the full thing. This is women's basketball here, college basketball. Louisville and Virginia. It was Louisville 71-49. Duke and Notre Dame. It was Notre Dame 89-61. Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Mississippi State 80-66. We gave Minnesota and Maryland. It was at Maryland, evidently. Wake Forest and North Carolina State. North Carolina State 80-46. Iowa and Indiana. Indiana 75-73. 2-point game there. Kentucky and South Carolina 65-57. Kentucky. University of Miami and Virginia Tech 73-65. Gonzaga and Santa Clara. Gonzaga 74-61. Pittsburgh and Syracuse. Syracuse 90-63. Tennessee and Texas A&M. It was Texas A&M 79-62. And finally, Denver and South Dakota 73-58 there. And on to the men's part of it. We have Pepperdine out of Los Angeles area and Gonzaga 92-64, and Michigan and Minnesota. This one was at Minnesota, Michigan 69-60. They were just a little too much firepower there. And to the NBA on Thursday night, we have, let's see, the Suns were at the Cavaliers in Cleveland. Cavaliers 111-98. The Heat was at the 76ers. Heat 106-92. The Trailblazers and Nets. There's the Trailblazers 113-99 for the Nets of New York. The Celtics and the Bucks in Milwaukee. It was Bucks 98-97, 2-point game. The Kings and Warriors, it was another 2-point game. Warriors 125-123. And finally, the Rockets of Houston and the Lakers in Los Angeles. It was the Lakers 111-106. And finally, to the National Hockey League, the Capitals and Maple Leagues. The final there, Capitals 3-2. The Hurricanes and Panthers. It was the Hurricanes 4-3. The Senators and Devils. Devils shut out the Senators 4-0. The Wild and the Rangers. It was a Wild 4-1. And the Sharks shut out our Penguins 4-0. The Flyers and the Canadiens. It was Canadiens that did the flying. It was 6-1. The Sabres and the Lightnings. It was the Lightnings 2-1. The Kings and Predators. It was the Predators, another 2-1 game. The Blues and the Stars. It was the Stars 5-2. The Islanders and the Oilers in overtime at the Oilers 4-3. Oilers. The Coyotes and Canucks in final overtime there. It was the Coyotes 3-2 over the Canucks. This will do it for us. We'll have the Monday morning. We'll have a Numbers Man. That's our financial program, our economics program. It will be this weekend. We'll have the open source report. We just about finished it finally. And on Sunday we have special programming for African History Week. Not sure how we'll handle that. And on Monday morning, we had the Monday morning quarterback. Incidentally, if you're using the Amazon so-called smart speakers or the Google speakers or anyone else that has one, just say the word Boston Red, or you can say Numbers Man, and we will pop up, I promise you. Or you can check us out on the RSS feed, a civilized thing to do there. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on tomorrow morning, the week that was. We'll know what happened in Venezuela. We'll start, I guess, getting some of the votes in from Nigeria. And I don't know what else. Good day.